Particularly difficult problem of an exacerbation of a health disparity. We've known literally forever that diseases like diabetes, hypertension, obesity, and asthma are disproportionately afflicting the minority populations, particularly the African Americans. Unfortunately, when you look at the predisposing conditions that lead to a bad outcome with coronavirus, the things that get people into ICUs, that require intubation and often lead to death, they are just those very comorbidities that are unfortunately disproportionately prevalent in the African American population. So we're very concerned about that. It's very sad. It's nothing we can do about it right now except to try and give them the best possible care to avoid those complications. Thank you.
Do we need a big study to figure out why we have this disparity, or is it staring us dead in the face?
Well, certainly, Chuck, and first of all, thank you for having me on today. And we know that there are three overarching reasons. One is the pre-existing conditions of increased hypertension, diabetes that have disproportionately affected African Americans and communities of color. And so it's that pre-existing condition. We know that actually that was pre-COVID-19. I know the AMA has just created our Center for Health Equity to look at these issues, and we're headquartered in Chicago, so working with the community, that's very important. The other piece, though, I think we also need to highlight is misinformation. I have said I spent the first 2 weeks of this pandemic dispelling myths among friends and family, really not in my capacity as AMA president, that African Americans could not become infected, or even young people. So we have to make sure we get the correct information out in the ways that communities access that information. And the third is looking at the workers, the essential workers, many of whom are from communities of color that are still out there working. Of course, they are more exposed. So we really have to make sure we're looking at all of those. But you're right, these numbers are not surprising because we already knew of these disproportionate impacts.
Almost unbelievable, family. Almost unbelievable. If you do not know that media is warfare. It was the mainstream media who introduced the ideal of race into the conversation as they covered the pandemic, some refer to as a plandemic, right here in America. And then we finally sat down and began to look at their narration and the numbers, which have been recorded and reported by reputable organizations. We see a great contradiction. We see a great misinformation being provided to the black masses, the brown masses, and the white masses, all by the mainstream media. First off the bat, we understand that 75% of the time, C19 is killing people 65 and above. 75% of the time, C19 is killing people 65 and up, okay? So we understood that the C19 and the makeup of it is not racially selecting people. C19 is not racist. C19, if anything, is an ageist. And then when you accompany that information along with preconditions, it becomes more easily understood that, yes, if you have a precondition and C19 got in your system, you run a high risk of leaving here. That's a fact. But now back to the mainstream media as they introduce the topic and the ideal of race as they covered the pandemic. Let's break this down quickly and briefly. Now, in some reports, you'll see that the black demographic ranges, the population ranges between 12% to all the way to 14%. Okay, here on this channel, we say it's about 13%. But in this particular report by Statista, we say that we see that they're saying the black demographic is at 12.6%. And they're suggesting, they said that the total COVID deaths were 13.8% on the black side. That's a 1.2% difference. So if I ask myself, what is your definition of disproportionate death? What's your definition of being disproportionate? So based upon the numbers, and we already said the numbers and the narration don't match, but we will say based upon the numbers, it would be 1.2%. That's their definition of disproportionate. Moving on. Now we take a look at the brown population or the Latino or Hispanic population here in America. We see that they represent about 18.6% of the total population here in America. But yet they represented about 15.1% of the total COVID deaths. So we see that on the total COVID death side, it's less than the total population of the Hispanic side. Okay, so where is the disproportionate death with the brown and Latino community of America? And we know that it's at 1.2% with Black America. Now we look at white America and we see that they represent non-Hispanic whites in America. We see they represent about 59.7% of the total population. But yet they represented 66% of the total COVID deaths. So if any group was disproportionately being affected by the C19 virus along the lines of death, it certainly was not the brown group. It certainly was not the black group. It was the white group. And that's why the mainstream media, as they was reporting this, we were scratching our head, looking at them with that side eye.
And as we continue further into the pandemic, it is clear its effects are not equal across all racial and ethnic groups. In fact, African Americans are disproportionately affected by it. ABC 10's Monica Coleman here to explain how African Americans are being impacted.
Morning, Walt. Yeah, so yesterday in a web seminar by UC Davis, Dr. Michael Lucian broke down the effects the pandemic is having on the Black community. Dr. Lucian says the facts are this: African Americans are more likely to test positive for COVID-19 and more likely to end up in the hospital. Black and Latin children are more likely to be hospitalized due to COVID-19 and have higher rates of complications. Nationwide, Black people account for 18% of deaths, despite making up only 12% of the U.S. population.
Okay, the whole entire time. And now we are now presenting on this finally, and we're going to do it very brief and give you sound information. White population at 59.7, total death at 66. Brown population 18.6, total death 15.1. Black population 12.6%, total death 13.8%. And so while the mainstream media was the one to introduce race into the conversation, we're not doing it. We do not believe for one moment that C19 was racist. We do not believe that it was racially selecting people. We believe that C19 was attacking people based upon their age, as the numbers bear out for us. Well then, Bart, how is it that white America was disproportionately dying from C19? Very simple, based upon the number of age, based upon common age. What's the common age of white America? 58. See, white America is not just the oldest population in America. They're not just the oldest population in America. They have the oldest population worldwide. They have a population of 58. The common age for Black America is about 29 to 30. And the common age for Brown America is like 10 or 11, somewhere along those lines. Don't quote me on that one, but somewhere along those lines, okay? And then so that goes back to the point. C19 is killing people who are 65 and up 75% of the time. Who has the most 65 and up people in their group? White America. That's why I was attacking them and killing them at a disproportionate rate, not based upon age, not based upon race, based upon age. And there are some exceptions to this throughout the world. But when you look at the worldwide scope and the scene of things, as C19 was taking people out of here, you're going to see that when I don't like talking like that, but when it was taking people's lives, you understand? When C19 was taking people's lives, you're going to see that it was mainly based upon age, not just America, but on a worldwide scale. The European population has has older populations as well. COVID was very heavy there. When you look at the continent of Africa, okay, the continent of Africa, when C19 got there, what happened? Very little shutdowns, very little spreading, very little death. And the reason why that was, once again, based upon age. What's the common age in Africa? The common age is 19. When this was going on, when the pandemic was going on, the common age of Africans were 18. They are the youngest population of people on the planet Earth. White America is the oldest population of people on planet Earth. Now, when we had this conversation real quick, I want to introduce one topic, because we're going to do a video on this country later. That would be the country of Japan. I want to bring them into the equation because they have a very old population as well. The common age is about between 40 and 50. You did not see much death on their side, and that's because they have the oldest and healthiest population, conjunction. Oldest and healthiest population is in Japan. They have a demographic decline similar to that of white America, but they have very good health practices and procedures and policies that we will share later on this channel, okay? But as we said, when we look at white America being the oldest population, that explains why C19 was taking them out of here at a disproportionate rate. When we look at Africa having a common age of 18, we see why C19 was not so strong and not as rampant in that area of the world as it was throughout the rest of the world, because we know Africans are the youngest people on this planet at 18.8 common age. Family, that's it, man. I think I gave it up. We talked about how the mainstream media introduced the topic of race. And when they introduced the topic of race, they introduced it wrongly from two perspectives. One, they tried to say that it was black and brown people being disproportionately affected by it, and it's not true. And they tried to say that the COVID-19 or the C19 virus was somehow racially attacking people, which was not true. The C19 virus was moving according to preconditions, but even above that, it was taking people's lives based upon age. Family, share, like, and we go.